My name is Remember Miamingi, and I'm going to be your facilitator on the platform that is We Are South Sudan. I am from South Sudan, and this platform is put together by South Sudanese, their African friends, their international friends. It's a platform for solidarity. This YouTube channel is one component of a broader project of peace, just and sustainable peace in South Sudan. Together with this, we will be putting together a website, we're going to put together a musical concert, we're going to bring together a number of African and international players to build momentum and solidarity for a sustainable peace in South Sudan. And today we're just going to have a basic discussion about South Sudan. We're going to look at facts and figures with respect to the country South Sudan. And that will give us the context in which we then are going to be having on a weekly basis. We're going to discuss topical issues with respect to South Sudan. And those topical issues will be understood against the background of the basic introductory presentation that we're going to be making today. Now, South Sudan became the 55th African country on the 11th of July, 2011, after 50 years of war. 50 years of fighting war with North Sudan, and through a peaceful referendum in 2011, it became an independent country. So South Sudan is bordered to the north by Sudan, and to the west by Ethiopia, and to the south by Kenya, Uganda, and Democratic Republic of Congo, and to the west by the Central African Republic. So geographically, South Sudan is situated in the eastern part of Africa. South Sudan is, in terms of landmass, is almost the size of Uganda and Kenya put together, over 500,000 square kilometers of land. South Sudan is populated, the population is estimated to be around between 10 and 12 million people, composed primarily of 64 tribes, the main one being the Dinka, the Nuer, the Zande, the Bari speakers, and the Shuluk. So the country is large, but as you've just mentioned, there's a population of about between 10 to 12 million people. Now, South Sudan is a resource-rich country. There is a huge deposit of gold, silver, limestone, gemstone across the country, in addition to agricultural potential of South Sudan. You have the Gama Arabic in 7 of the 10 states in South Sudan. So in terms of resources, South Sudan is rich in terms of natural resources. It is still untapped potential. But at the time when South Sudan got independence in 2011, the government of South Sudan literally inherited an empty land with the people in it. So there was literally no infrastructure, there were no roads, there were no government institutions. So we had a rebel movement, which is the Sudanese People Liberation Army, that fought the government of Sudan for over starting from 1983, for over 20 years, and it was this rebel movement that eventually entered into a peace agreement with Sudan in 2005. But I'm sure people will want to wonder, but why was South Sudan fighting for this number of years? The root is in the history of the country. Now, Sudan was a British colony, and together with the Egyptians, British ran what was called the condominium rule in South Sudan, which was a joint rule in South Sudan. And history has it that it was in the plan of the colonial masters to try and develop the northern part of the country for an eventual union with Egypt, and the southern part of the country for an eventual union with the eastern part of the country. So as a result of this policy, we had Islam, Arabic, and Arabic culture introduced in the north, and we had Christianity and Christian and English language introduced in the south. Given the disparity between the northern part of the continent and the Eastern African region, resources by the colonial masters were then dedicated to developing the northern part of the country with eventual aim, as I've said earlier on, of unity with Egypt. And that was done at the expense of South Sudan. So when the discussions around independence started taking place, the understanding still with respect to the colonial masters was probably the northern part of the country will be granted independence, and then they will still stay in the southern part of the country. But that was not what happened. Sudanese decided to go for independence as one country. But eventually, the southern part of the country insisted that given the disparity in terms of development and differences in language and in culture and in identity, that it will be good for Sudan to be granted an independency as a federal state. And that was the understanding. But then when independence was granted, Sudan was granted an independence as one unitary state. And Southerners were completely, they felt that they were betrayed, they felt the promises made to them were not kept. And on the 25th of August, 1955, Southern Sudanese, they shot the first bullet for fighting for what they believe was their right. And that went on until 1972, when there was the Addis Ababa agreement that gave South Sudan some kind of autonomy. And in 1983, that autonomy was then, the agreement, the terms of agreement was withdrawn. Sudan was declared as one, and Islamic religion was enforced across the country. Arabic language became the official language of the country. And from that moment on, South Sudanese again went into the bush, started fighting for a liberation of the country, what was then called a New Sudan. And that liberation was led by Dr. John Garang, the Mayor, on the platform of the Sudanese People Liberation Army, which was the army that signed an agreement with the government in 2005, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, that gave South Sudan the right to vote in a referendum, either to become an independent country or become part of South Sudan under one country, two system. And in January 2011, South Sudanese voted for an independent country, and that gave South Sudan its independence as a country. But even though South Sudan became a country with sovereignty, with all the features of a state, it inherited 50 years of legacy of war, a population that was highly militarized, a land that had no infrastructure, no development, and of course an aspiration of its own people for a dignified living. And that was not only in terms of the developmental challenges that South Sudan inherited and the historical legacy that it inherited, it also inherited the challenge of building together a cohesive nation. Because before the independence, South Sudanese fought for one country, united country, where all Sudanese will be in. But because that did not work out and South Sudanese was forced to vote in for an independent country, they had to sit together and determine the term under which they were going to stay as one country. Now, the government that took over, which is the government by the SPLM, the SPLM was the political wing of the SPLA, which was the rebel movement that fought in, had no experience whatsoever in government, and the only experience they had was a military experience. And so it was this movement that took over the governance of the country. So we had all the three arms of government, the executive, the judiciary, and the parliament, predominantly composed of former rebel fighters.